After flying to Delhi, we transferred, along with our bikes, to a hotel for the night. The following morning, we took an internal flight to Bagdogra in the far northeast of India. Our local agent had laid on a traditional Indian greeting for us in the airport arrival lounge. Our bikes were then transferred to a waiting lorry, whilst we boarded a coach. Bagdogra lies in the Indian state of West Bengal. We were travelling 90 kilometres north to the colonial hill station of Darjeeling, where we would begin our cycle tour into Sikkim. The steep winding road climbed up through the thickly forested hills alongside the tracks of the Darjeeling Himalayan Railway. Opened in 1881, it is one of only a few hill railways still operating in India and is listed as a World Heritage Site. The road continued to climb upwards towards Darjeeling at over 2,100 metres above sea level. We stopped along the way at a tea house where we had a dramatic view of the setting sun. We arrived at our hotel in Darjeeling in the late evening. Even in the dark it looked like a magnificent palace. We were served tea and biscuits in the library before having dinner and then to bed. In the morning, we saw the true splendour of our hotel, the Mayfair Hill Resort in Darjeeling. It was once a Maharaja's summer palace. Our first job was to reassemble our bikes and to make sure they had survived the journey by air and truck intact.
Well, here we are in Darjeeling with my gorgeous guide, Pat. Absolutely amazing hotel with superb views over the town of Darjeeling. And as you can see, we're in the middle now reassembling our bikes, and then we'll probably go wandering around the town to see what we can see.
Darjeeling lies on a steep-sided ridge with its buildings stacked one above the other. Its narrow streets are lined with markets. Darjeeling is best known for its tea, and we couldn't miss an opportunity to call into a tea house to sample a selection of the teas produced in the region. That evening, our leader John gave us a briefing on the ride for the following day.
As you all know, we're going to have vehicle support throughout the tour. It's going to vary a little bit from day to day, and tomorrow is one of those days where the bus will actually take a detour around the outside and meet us at Naya Bazaar, which is only about 30k down the road, 25k down the road. It can't come on our route because it's too steep and too narrow for the bus to go down. So tomorrow what we've done is we've asked the hotel to bring the breakfast time forward for us by half an hour. So we set breakfast for 7 o'clock and then we'll be able to set off hopefully by sort of 8 or very close to 8. 7:30, yeah.
Sikkim is one of India's smallest states, measuring just 65 kilometres across and 110 kilometres from top to bottom. It is bounded on the west by Nepal, to the north and east by Tibet, and by Bhutan on the southeast. The world's third highest mountain, Kanchenjunga, lies on the border between Sikkim and Nepal. Our first day's riding would take us north from Darjeeling, crossing over the border into Sikkim before a long climb at the end of the day to Pemyangtse. As we left Darjeeling, we could see the snow-capped peaks of the Himalaya in the distance. The road out of Darjeeling plunged through a series of steep hairpin bends, losing 1,000 metres of height in just 8 kilometres. The slope eased as we descended through a region of tea plantations. Below us we could see the Teesta River, which formed the border with Sikkim.
Well, after a pretty fearsome descent from Darjeeling, we've now reached the border with Sikkim, so the real tour starts here.
After crossing into Sikkim, we followed the west bank of the Teesta River on a fairly level road, heading towards the town of Legship. Our support vehicle would meet us along the way each day and provide us with a packed lunch. On the outskirts of Legship, the road began its long, steep climb.
We're on the climb now into Pelling. I tell you, I've never been so hot in my entire life. It's about a 1,300 metre climb. Taking us about 2.5 hours. And well, we'll get there eventually. But the views on the climb are pretty stunning. It's a switchback road, so they vary all the time. So at least it takes your mind off the continuous climbing.
After regrouping in the village of Gazing, it was onward and upwards for the last 7 kilometres to Pemyangtse. It was almost dark by the time most of us reached the hotel.
Okay guys, what do we think of it so far? Thank you.
The morning light gave us our first proper look at our hotel. But it was the awe-inspiring view from the hotel that took our breath away.
Well, after yesterday's arduous climb, we've reached this incredible hotel with the most impressive view I've ever seen from any hotel window of Kanchenjunga, the world's 3rd highest mountain. Absolutely incredible. Worth every minute of every bit of sweat from yesterday's climb.
We had a free day in Pemyangtse, so we first walked up to the monastery, which was just a few hundred yards from the hotel. From the monastery, we had a bird's eye view of the ruined city of Rodensa, which was the capital city of Sikkim in the 17th century. A short distance from Pemyangtse was a small town of Pelling, from where there are more dramatic views of the Kanchenjunga mountain range. Pelling also had a monastery, accessed via a steep zigzag track. We retraced our steps back down the zigzag track to our hotel, where we watched the sun setting over Kanchenjunga. The following day we left Pemyangtse and travelled north to Yuksom. Along the way we did an out and back ride to Kanchenjunga Lake. After a final look at Kanchenjunga, we left our hotel in Pemyangtse. As was the case most mornings, we came across some smartly dressed children making their way to school. The first 20 kilometres of the day's ride was downhill, passing through wooded hillsides and alongside several waterfalls. Several sections of the road had been washed away during the monsoon and were undergoing repair. We diverted off the main road and began the 10-kilometre climb up to Kanchenjunga Lake. Near the lake, we regrouped for an 11's stop. Look, dairy milk chocolate! Whee! The lake was a short walk away through the forest. We retraced our route back down from the lake to rejoin the main road to Yuksom. It was also packed lunchtime. Let's see what we've got for lunch. Boiled egg. Something else. What's this? Not sure yet. What's that? Fruitcake? No fruitcake. What's that? Yeah. Sandwich. No. After lunch we were off again, cycling along a road high above the Rangit River. The road, in places, was in a pretty bad state, but despite this, the driver of our support vehicle did a superb job in negotiating the rough surfaces. Sections of the road were in a constant state of repair, and we frequently came across groups of workers, mainly women, breaking up stone to produce aggregate. Bicycles, especially those ridden by Westerners, were a rare sight for the locals. Every day we would be chased by school children, fascinated by the sight of these weird machines and the strange people riding them.
Faster! Faster!
Once we reached the bridge over the Rangit River, we knew that it would be time to start the 12-kilometre climb to Yuksom, our destination for the day. On the outskirts of Yuksom, we were again chased by school children, fascinated by us and our bicycles. On arriving at our hotel, we were treated to tea and biscuits on the lawn. Well, we are English. The following day's ride would take us to the small town of Ravangla, a distance of 52 kilometres. After emerging from the hotel after breakfast, we were greeted by more stupendous views of the snow-covered Himalayan peaks. Whilst our support crew loaded our luggage onto the coach, we set off from Yuksom. We passed a section of road, half of which had collapsed down the mountainside. It was hard to believe that our coach would be able to squeeze through. The first part of the ride was downhill. We had good views of the terraced paddy fields that line the steep-sided valleys. Once we passed the Famrong waterfall, the road began to climb for about 10 kilometres. What goes up has to go down, so we descended for about 15 kilometres to reach a suspension bridge over the Rangit River. It was here that we had a short 11s stop before we began a 20-kilometre climb up to our destination, Ravangla. The first 5 kilometres of the climb was on a very rough road. It was also incredibly steep in places. Thankfully, the tarmac returned, and after a short lunch stop, we continued onwards and upwards. When we reached Ravangla, we were surprised to be told that we had to get into some four-wheel drive vehicles. It turned out that the hotel was perched on top of a mountainside at 2,000 metres and was only accessible on foot or by four-wheel drive. The hotel consisted of a series of log cabins, all with their own small flower gardens. We were treated with tea on arrival and, rather unusually, cold chips. The next day we left Ravangla, heading east to Gangtok, a distance of 50 kilometres. Okay, this is our view outside of our bedroom window this morning. Absolutely stupendous. Not. Fortunately, the clouds showed signs of lifting as we made our way on foot back down to the road where we had left our bikes the previous night. After leaving Ravangla, we headed off the main road and began a long, gradual climb. As always, this was followed by a long descent to the village of Temi, where we reached a closed biodiversity park for a spot of elevenses. The road continued downwards, passing through the only tea plantation in Sikkim. As we lost more height, we saw more examples of the terraced paddy fields. We also had a bird's eye view of the Teesta River far below us and one of the many hydroelectric power stations along its path. After a further long descent, we crossed the Teesta River and had a lunch stop. Because of the very high temperature and the fact that it was a 30-kilometre climb to Gangtok, we transferred our bikes into a truck, whilst most of us did the rest of the journey in a coach. Three of our number, Richard, Aileen and David, had decided to ride this final leg to Gangtok.
Thank you. Good driving.
Upon reaching the hotel, it was another silk scarf welcome, followed by a plum brandy reception. We began the journey into North Sikkim by cycling from Gangtok to the town of Mangan, a distance of 69 kilometres. Before setting off, we made sure we had plenty of water and our bikes were in good mechanical order. The first 10 kilometres of road out of Gangtok were steep and pretty rough most of the way. At the top of the climb, we reached the Tashi viewpoint. Unfortunately, the clouds were obscuring the high Himalayan peaks. We then had a long descent of 15 kilometres, with the road barely rideable in places. All the while, we were followed by our coach driver, who did an incredible job of negotiating the roads and squeezing through in the narrowest of gaps. Crossing the bridge over the River Kola marked the end of the descent, but we then had a 15-kilometre climb, much of it steep and rough. At the top we had lunch. It was then downhill for 20 kilometres to reach the Teesta River. We crossed the river at Rang Rang on a new concrete bridge, and from here it was a steep 6-kilometre climb to our hotel for the night at Mangan. Our route continued northward to the remote town of Lakung in the district of North Sikkim. While the group made ready to depart, my bike was being loaded onto the truck as I'd gone down with a serious bout of Delhi belly. I followed the group in a 4-wheel drive as they left the hotel and cycled out of Mangan. The road climbed steadily for around 20 kilometres, but this gave us good views up to the mountains as well as down to the Teesta River. In sections, landslides had washed the road down the mountainside, making riding almost impossible. We reached the police checkpoint on the border with North Sikkim at the village of Tong, where we also had an 11's break. Although the road sign indicated that the road to Chung Thang was open, our local guide told us that it would be impossible to ride, so all of the bikes were loaded onto a truck. We all then boarded 4-wheel drive vehicles for the 10-kilometre climb up to Chung Thang. Our way was blocked by workmen clearing the road following a rockfall, but after a few words from our guide, they let us through. A short descent brought us down into Chung Thang, where the bikes were offloaded from the truck. For the next 20 kilometres, the road climbed steadily up through the Lakung Valley. A series of steep hairpin bends made the going tough, especially in the heat. We finally saw Lakung in the distance, lying in the valley floor surrounded by high mountains, and at 2,500 metres above sea level, this would be the highest point of our tour. We did very little cycling the next day as we retraced our steps in the support vehicles back through Mangan and onto the concrete bridge at Rang Rang. It was then a short ride up to the town of Rumtek. Once the bikes were loaded onto the truck, we made our way back down the valley, leaving Lakung behind on a clear, sunny morning. During the drive down the valley, one of the 4-wheel drive vehicles had a puncture. It was a good job it wasn't on one of the narrow stretches of road. We were off again, but amazingly, at the police checkpoint in Tong, 2 more of the vehicles had punctures, causing another lengthy delay. We eventually arrived at the concrete bridge at Rang Rang, where we unloaded the bikes and then set off on a long climb up to Rumtek. Because of the delays caused by the punctures, we had to reload our bikes onto the truck as it was getting dark. We finished the day with a campfire outside of the hotel after dinner. The following day was our last on the bikes as we headed south from Rumtek, crossing over the border into West Bengal and then climbing up to our final hotel at Kalimpong, a distance of 67 kilometres. The morning light gave us a chance to admire the tremendous setting of our hotel as we ate our breakfast outside in the warm sunshine. Rumtek is home to a Buddhist monastery built in the 1960s to replace one destroyed in Tibet during the Cultural Revolution. The Indian authorities, however, have so far refused to allow the Lama to take up residence for fear of upsetting the Chinese. After spending the morning walking around the monastery, we were on our bikes heading downhill to Rangpo, where we crossed the border back into West Bengal. It was a long 24-kilometre climb to the end of the tour in Kalimpong. Our local guide Karma, bus driver Raju and driver assistant Vikram prepared tea, coffee and snacks partway up the climb, but by the time most riders had arrived it was already getting dark. And as the sun sinks slowly in the west, the group takes the pedals off their bikes for the last time. That's just to remind me what's going on here, it's almost dark. As the sun began to set, the bikes were made ready for loading onto the truck, whilst we caught a lift on the coach into Kalimpong. The day, and the cycle tour, ended with food and plenty of it at our luxurious hotel in Kalimpong. Our cycle tour of Sikkim had given us an insight into this fascinating Indian state. The steep-sided valleys and their terraced fields, the waterfalls cascading down from the mountains. There is the mighty Teesta River, the numerous suspension bridges that cross the rivers, the brightly coloured monasteries. There were the roads and how incredibly steep they were. Although they were rough in places, it was impressive to see the effort involved in keeping them open. The amazing views of the Himalayan mountains. But most of all, it was the people, and in particular the children, that we shall remember the most. Whether they were working in the tea plantations, breaking stones on the side of the road, or running alongside us as we cycled up yet another steep hill.